Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike tech and maintenance related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag askgcntech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible within the allotted time. So first up is from generic_cyclist, who says, I'm moving a tyre I had set up tubeless onto a hooked rim to a hookless rim. I know that the tyre type is compatible with a hookless rim. Are there any issues I need to worry about? Do I need to clean the dried sealant off the bead to get a good interface with the hookless rims? So a couple of things. First one is that when tyres are mounted and inflated, they can stretch a little bit on the bead. And so if you're then taking that off and putting it on a new rim, particularly a hookless one, having no stretch is super important on a hookless rim. If it's an older tyre, it may have stretched a little bit. So it might be better to go for a newer tyre and just keep that one set up on the hooked rim. Although newer tyres with the standards that have been introduced shouldn't stretch in that way, but it's something to be mindful of, especially if you're struggling to get an airtight seal when you inflate it. The other issue is, yes, you're right to want to clean sealant off the tyre. The reason being is that when you put the tyre and you mount it into the wheel and you put it on that internal channel, when you initially go to inflate it, that tyre bead has to push up onto the shelf out of that channel and then snap onto the rim and inflate. Now, what can cause problems is if you do have dried sealant on the bottom edge of your tyre, then that'll create additional friction, which will make it harder for that tyre bead to snap out onto the rim. So that can mean when you do that initial inflation, which is so crucial when you're setting up tubeless, it might not work very well. So yeah, make sure you do clean the tyre if you're going to try that. But otherwise, yeah, should be okay. Der Wickinger is next and says, hi you two. Sorry, it's just me this week. Alex is filming a Campagnolo dream build. But he says, is there an effective way to clean rust off drivetrain components without taking them off your bike? I have an older bike that could really do with some TLC, but I don't trust my mechanic skills to take it apart. There are things you can do, but it's always going to be easier to take them off. I think we have lots of videos about how to disassemble components, including even older components and bottom brackets and things like that. Older bikes tend to have threaded BSA bottom brackets. And Alex has done a really good video on how to remove rust from your bike. So make sure you check that out. We'll link it after this one. Next up is from 1992 Oasis, vintage year. How much aero gains am I missing out on if I run a 28mm tyre on my Ribble, which can accommodate far wider tyres? Is the gap between the forks and the tyre an issue or overthinking it? It's going to go up to 32mm when I need new tyres. Yeah, you're overthinking it here. Like the thing that's going to make far more difference is the correct tyre being used for the surface and the correct pressure being used in that tyre are going to make far more difference. I mean, in the terms of the aerodynamics of the system of your bike, you're talking a very marginal thing there that you can't always control. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that too much. What probably would make even more difference is the tyre rim interface. So if you're using deep section wheels, then having that optimum tyre aerodynamically sized to that particular rim is probably going to make more difference. But again, that's not always faster because it depends on the surface that you're riding on. Check out the Pirelli tyre pressure calculator, or the Silca tyre pressure calculator for that matter, if you're trying to optimise your tyre pressure. Rob Grappetta says, hi Ollie and Alex, whatever your names are. I'm off to the Pyrenees this summer with my mates, and we've rented bikes that have French brakes, i.e. the levers are reversed to the normal sort of way we do it in the UK. I've never ridden a bike with this brake setup. How much of an issue is it? Does it take long to adjust? Is there anything I can do to prepare? Short of changing my UK brake setup to French brake. Well, you could do that. A lot of bike shops and rental places do actually offer brakes the other way around, although that's more common in places where there's more cyclotourists. So for example, if you go to Mallorca, a lot of rental places there, because there's so much of it, do actually offer bikes that have the specific sort of moto braking, where the front brake is on the right. However, in terms of getting used to it, it's something I've had to do many times, particularly going on bike launches and various things to visit bike brands over the years. They often give you a bike with the brakes the wrong way around, for my preference. And I've found it to be fine. Where it can catch you out, though, and something to be mindful of, is it's when you have to then do like an emergency stop. So if someone pulls out in front of you, or for whatever reason, all of a sudden you go on the brakes, at that point I find instinct takes over, and you then naturally grab more of what you perceive to be the front brake and usually lock your rear. So that's just something to be aware of. But I think as long as you're mindful of it and just tentative on the first few days, you should be okay. You can get used to it. It's a bit like learning the new computer game controls on a new game or something like that. Next question is from Maurice Weller, who says, I'm changing my handlebars, going down from 46 centimetres to 40 centimetres, so going narrower. Both my old and new bikes are internally routed. Do I have to shorten my brake and gear cable? If you were dropping a couple of centimetres, you'd probably be able to get away with it. However, dropping down that, which is 6 centimetres, that's pretty significant. So I think what you're going to find is you're going to struggle to actually fit that extra hose internally routed down in through the bar, but also in through the frame and in through the headset and things like that. It's useful to have a little bit extra, especially for traveling, so that you can easily get bars on and off. And you want to have a little bit extra on there. But going from 6 centimetres down, I think the sensible thing there is to shorten your hoses. But use this as an excuse to bleed your brakes and check everything's good and put new cables in to make sure your gears are working really good as well. They'll thank you in the long run. And the last question this week is from Fairly Secret Cyclist, who says, Hi guys, in May I will be attempting the Flandrian Challenge over 3 days, inspired by Ollie. Thanks. It was really, really hard. Sorry. Should I ride my Roubaix 5234 with an 1134 cassette and 30mm tyres, or a Diverge with a Wombai with an 1144 on the back and a 42 chain on the front with 38mm tyres? The Diverge is 1 kilogram heavier. I think because the climbs aren't super long, I think that with a 34-34, that will be sufficient. That, I think, especially as you're doing it over 3 days, as well, I think, when you think of the steepest climbs in that area, what is a bigger issue often is traction, if the cobbles are slippy, as we saw this year in the Tour of Flanders. But, if you're doing it in May, it's likely to be a bit drier, and there's not going to be loads of people around. And 30mm tyres, I think you'll be spot on. If you can put 32s in, probably do that. But I think that the Diverge might be a bit of overkill. I think the Roubaix would be my pick. But you'll have a better idea based on your fitness. And I think one of the things worth considering is having a look at an online gear calculator so that you can see what cadence relates to what speed. And there you'll have a better idea of when you're on the worst climbs, like a 25% climb, on the steepest bits of the Koppenberg, then you'll have a better idea then of if that's sufficient for you. If there's a 25% climb near you, even if it's not cobbled, that would be a good way to try and gauge it, if you can measure your speed up there on the steepest bit, and maybe go from that. Right, sorry if we've not got round to your question, as that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, this week. But I hope I've been able to answer as many of them as possible, and keep them coming down in the comment section below, #askgcntech, and we'll do our best to get more of them next week. Right, I'm going to go now. Love you, bye!